Good morning, everyone. Today is the Hilula of Rabbi Yitzhak Benoualid, and I want to share with you what I discussed yesterday in the Hilula. Is that the greatest manifestation of the Hilula is learning the Torah of the Tzaddik Rabbi Yitzhak Benoualid. Yitzhak Benoualid lived in the 1800s, and he was known for his tremendous humility, his anava, and always running away from positions of honor. He never wanted to take upon himself to be the leader, and it was thrust upon him. And he even ran away to Gibraltar at one point in order to run away from it. And throughout his lifetime, he had a very close correspondence and Kasher with tzaddikim from the generation, particularly Rabbi Yaakov Abir. There are recollections of him meeting Rabbi Yaakov Abir and exchanging letters. When once Rabbi Yaakov Abir returned from all of his travels in Morocco, they came back. They told him, "What did you see?" He said, "I saw many great rabbanim, but the greatest of all was Rabbi Yitzhak Benoualid." And in another version, he says, "I saw 4 great rabbanim: Rabbi Yitzhak Benoualid, Rabbi Yaakov Abitan from Marrakesh, Rabbi Shauli ben Dinan from Fez, and Rabbi Yehuda Moyal from Mogador." Those are the 4 great people he said that he saw. And either way, there is one teshuvah that was written in the year Tafresh Yud Aleph. Tafresh Yud Aleph is 170 years ago. 170 years ago, where he has a correspondence with Rabbi Yaakov Abir in Shelot Utshuvot Vayomer Yitzchak Yoredea Siman Ayin. And it's a fascinating topic that is very relevant halacha lema'aseh that people don't know about. And I wanted to share with you the perspective of Rabbi Yaakov Abir, which is the lenient position over here against Rabbi Yitzhak Benoualid. So Rabbi Yitzhak quotes the following: Siman Ayin. Ze ma sheheshavti al psak din shekatav Moharia Buchtzera. He doesn't write Abu Chatzera, Buchtzera. Which is that way. Somebody told me it's written in a lot of the piyutim as well without the aleph. Lehatir benoten lagoy ma'ot liitasek benevelot v'trefot. Abir, you heard this yesterday, right? It's a chazara for you, which is that if you want to give money to a non-Jew, so the non-Jew should do business with non-kosher food for you. What's the problem with doing non-kosher food? Only basar b'chalav is asur bana'a. Many people don't know that there's an isur de oraita of doing business with ma'achalot asurot. There's an isur de oraita of doing business with ma'achalot asurot. And the question is, let's say you don't do directly business with it, you give a pack of money to a goy, and he does the business for you. Is that also permitted or forbidden? It was a huge controversy. They eventually sent this question to Rav Chaim Palaji as well, and he also weighed in on it. It was a very big discussion at the time. And Rabbi Yitzhak Benoualid starts off with the following. He starts off saying that the prohibition of isur schora b'ma'achalot asurot is a deoraita. Mipshat divrei Rambam nire de isur zeh v'deoraita. Besides 2 exceptions, if you are going to deal with fat of animal that's not kosher, or blood of animal, which is exceptions that are in the pasuk somehow they're learned from, but obviously that's not very common. Also isurid de rabbanan, like cheeses and milk that's not kosher. Cheeses, I'm talking about the cheese that's kosher ingredients, but just it was done by a non-Jew, so that's also permitted to do schora with. Or right, so wine as well. Wine is only de rabbanan. In other words, wine is so. Anything that's kosher is just asur de rabbanan. There's no isur schora. Isur schora is only going to be on isure de oraita, right? I think wine would fall into that category. Double check that. But so Rabbi Yitzhak starts from quoting many different sources, the Mishneh LaMelech, Rav David Pardo, and others that prove that isur schora b'ma'achalot asurot is de oraita. And if so, he says the following: What's the reason why you're not allowed to do schora b'ma'achalot asurot? The Rashba says that the reason why you're not allowed to do schora b'machalot that the Torah forbade it is because you're going to come and eat it. Good. You remember this. Abir, hazak ubaru. Because you may come to eat it. And if you may come to eat it, the Torah said it was asur. So, contended Rabbi Yaakov b'chsera, brought down in this teshuvah. Again, I don't think we have this teshuvah from Rabbi Yaakov b'chsera. But he contended that if that is the case, that you shouldn't have a problem over here because you're just giving the money for the goy to deal with the schora, but you're not dealing with it yourself. There shouldn't be an issue. That was Rabbi Yaakov Abir claim. Apparently, comes along Rabbi Yishak Benoualid and he says, I'm reading Dibura Madchil Lamadnu B'divrei Rav Zal. He brings from the Sefer Chavot Yair. The Chavot Yair, one of the great Achronim, was discussing this prohibition, and he said that even if you're not going to come to eat it, he was talking about that type of case. En lanu lilmod leakel b'makom shelo niskar hitiru chazal de lo kaim melan ki Rabbi Shimon de darish taima dekra leholid mimenu ta'am shiryuta de dayenu lehatir ma shehitiru chazal beferush af anan nam neima de agam shamru chazal טעם איסור סחורה, שמא יבוא לאכול, אין לנו ללמוד מזה היתר בנותן מעות לגוי להתעסק בנותן מפות, אך דלקה טעמה דשמא יבוא לאכול, דיינו יותר מה שהתירו הם, כפי תם זה הרשב"א ודעמי, היתר חמור וגמל. So comes along Rabbi Yitzhak Benoualid and says the following. Although that's the reason, and you would apply the reason that he might come to eat it, and it doesn't apply whenever you give money to a non-Jew to invest, that's only if we follow the opinion of Darshina Ta'ama Dikra, that you're allowed to, that you could take the reason and extrapolate different parameters from that reason, like Rabbi Shimon does a lot of time in Shas. But we don't follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon Darish Ta'ama Dikra. We don't follow that opinion of Rabbi Shimon de Darish Ta'ama Dikra. And if we don't follow that opinion, there was once a Rosh Yeshiva, his name was Rabbi Shimon. His name was Rabbi Shimon. He got up and they said, Rabbi, you're saying all these things on your own. He says, I'm allowed. My name is Rabbi Shimon de Darish Ta'ama Dikra. Rabbi Shimon would always say his own reasons. So he says we don't follow that. And if the Rashba already made different parameters because of that reason, that was because it was built in to the heter that Chazal gave. But not everywhere where a person's going to say that okay, this is the reason, so therefore I can do this and this. One of the big things that was discussions that is relevant to this, are you allowed to be in the business of tanning furs of non-kosher animals? Tanning furs and selling furs. It was a common business then, right? Selling fur, pelts, right? Pelts of furs. So one of the heterim that they gave is that it's not, you're not selling the animal for its meat. You're selling it just for its fur, for a technicality of it. That's not called schora b'machalot asura. Says Rabbi Benoualid, that's not comparable to here, because over there you're using those furs for something that's not food, but over here the guy is doing business for food. That's not going to be allowed. Right, for tefillin, exactly. But tefillin, there's an interesting halacha, which is that whatever you use for tefillin, it has to be mina mutar bepicha. It has to be something that you'd be allowed to eat, technically. It doesn't have to be, it has to be a kosher species.
But as much as it's kosher species, the animal doesn't necessarily, they don't check the cow that they use the skin of, whether it was a kosher, meaning whether it didn't have anything in its stomach or whatever.
But it has to be a kosher species. You know what happened recently this is in the early 2000s. There was a big controversy in Israel because they found out that the animals that they would shecht for meat in Uruguay was the zabu animal. It was very similar to the cow, but it had a hump. It was very similar, but it was a different species. And there were some postei Ashkenaz that said that just like by fowl you have to have a tradition, so based on a chokhmat adam, also by animals, by animal like cows, you also have to have, by behemoth, you also have to have a tradition. And therefore, many on the market, it became a whole controversy. People stopped eating meat overnight because they said it's coming from the zabu animal. And it all started because the question was asked because people are using the zabu animal for tefillin, and maybe it's not minam mutar bepicha, and that's how it evolved into the big question. Sfaradim didn't have this issue because Sfaradim hold that you don't need a tradition for animals as long as it has the split hooves and it chews its cut, it's kasher.
Right.
It's kasher.
But
Right.
if you shechted a cow and that cow was not kosher, you can still use its meat for tefillin?
I'm I have to double check that. Okay, so it comes along and he says, the Chachama Posek says that since Maran holds you're allowed to raise animals in order for their meat, that's only because you're not using it for food. But if you're going to use it for food, there wouldn't be such a heter. And therefore, Rabbi Yishak Benoualid, after he goes through all of the different proofs of Rabbi Yaakov Abir, he ends off and he says like this: even telling if it's asur for you to do, you're not allowed to tell a non-Jew to do. And it's like, and he says, klala ole de al nidon haba b'shela v'noten lagoy ma'od litasek b'nevelut r'od en lehatir la'asot ken lechatechila. You shouldn't be matir to do that. And although he does seem to imply that b'diavad it would be allowed. Now, they asked me yesterday, what about owning stocks? Owning stocks is a different level. Owning stocks in a company, because there are some poskim that say stock ownership is not a real ownership. So it's not a real ownership. It's not considered like you're doing schor mechalot asurot. Also, owning in a portfolio of many different other things, and part of those owning part of a portfolio that some of those things are machalot asurot would also be allowed. And the reason is because there's a heter regarding doing business is only if that's your main business. But for example, if an animal came to you, a non-kosher animal came to you b'mikre, like it wasn't part of your business, but it got caught in the net, and then what are you going to do with a non-kosher hippopotamus? You can make $3,000 off it. You're allowed to sell it. That's not a problem. It's because it's not your business of selling. It's not like you can't do a business of selling hippopotamus meat. I don't know if that's what you want to do in your life.
No, but the main business.
But if your main business is to sell machalot asurot, that everybody holds it. That's the Shulchan Aruch that it's asur. The question is giving money to a non-Jew. Rabbi Yaakov Abir held it was allowed. Rabbi Yishak Benoualid held it was forbidden. And owning stocks is not a real ownership. And having a portfolio is allowed, even according to Rabbi Yishak Benoualid, that says it's forbidden to give your money to non-Jews. But over here, even if you're giving it to a Jew, but it's not that's the main part. That's like part of the portfolio that comes in because you have all other stocks. That would be allowed. You understand? That would be allowed, even if you would say that it's a more of an ownership. And another thing, so Moshe Feinstein also allows if you're a delivery man for non-kosher. For example, let's say you're an Uber driver for non-kosher food. I've been asked this question before. So Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva about this. And he says that since it's in back of your truck, you're not going to eat the meat, and you're not an owner, it's okay. Both things. So you're not an owner, and you're not going to come to eat the meat. So if you're a chef at a restaurant, even though you don't own the meat, it's asur. Or if you are the owner, even if you're not dealing with it, it's asur. Rabbi Yishak Benoualid writes, and it seems to be Moshe Feinstein would agree to that. But if you don't have both, then it would be allowed. So that's what happened over here. This is what Rabbi Yishak Benoualid writes. It's a fascinating correspondence that they had between them. And as I mentioned, Rabbi Yishak Benoualid was one of the great lights of Dayanut that we had in Morocco, and his Kiddusha v'Tahara was well known. Yeh Zichru Baruch. Amen. Ken Yiratzon.